Hey guys, in this video I want to provide an introductory answer to the question, how does a website work? My goal today really is to demystify this process. Websites seem like magic, but obviously they're not. So here we go. The gist of it is this. A website is a special kind of document. So think like a Word document or an Excel document that you just look at. It's just like that, only it's got some things that make it interactive, clicking and animation and things like that. This document's also special because instead of living on your computer, it lives on a web server. And a web server, just to demystify that, is really almost exactly the same as your computer. It just is located inside of a data center where it gets attention from professionals and is kind of carefully cared for so that it's on 24/7, but it's just like a normal machine. So a website is an interactive document sitting on a web server. When you access a website, your browser requests that file, downloads it, interprets it, and displays it. And when you click on a link somewhere in that document, all it's doing is simply going to the web server and requesting a different document, downloading that, and display that. And that's really the gist of it. But we're going to get into it a little bit more here. So in order to understand this, there's a couple of concepts that we need to talk about. The first is obviously your local machine, which could be a traditional desktop computer, or it could be a mobile device, but we call this the local environment. I want to talk briefly about a cloud service called DNS, domain name service, which gets used every time you request a web page, and then I will talk about a host, or as I said, it's just a normal machine sitting in a data center where one of these things live. So what happens is when your local machine, you want to visit a website, you type in skyhookinteractive.com. Basically, your local machine sends out a request to the DNS service and says, hey, I want to get skyhookmarketing.com, and it requests that of the DNS server. What it's doing here is a quick lookup. What is the internet address for skyhookinteractive.com? The way you may have seen the internet works is with IP addresses. It doesn't work with names. So your computer sends a quick request to the DNS service, which responds back and says, oh, you're looking for skyhookinteractive.com. That's at 127.3.5.121 or whatever. So now your computer knows where on the network to go looking for that particular website. So it then makes a request, and over here you've got the server, 127.3.5.121, which is what we would call the host, or the web server. Basically your computer then goes, and this all happens in fractions of a second, your computer then goes, okay, 127.3.5.121, serve me the Skyhook website. Well, since this is the server where that lives, that server is then able to respond with, here is, we recommend you start with the home page. It'll serve you home.html, which is that file that then renders on your machine and displays what that home page looks like. After a few seconds of browsing, maybe you decide you want to click on the About page. Your machine then makes another request to that same server. Hey, can you give me the About Us page? And that server then responds, sure, that is about.html. And maybe now is a good time to explain. It may serve a number of other files. You're going to need image 1, you're going to need image 2, you're going to need video 1. Multiple files could be pushed through in that process. But that's basically how the first stage of it works. Your machine contacts DNS, gets an IP address, contacts the host, and the web file is now being served to you. What I want to do now is zero in a little bit more on what happens here on the web server, because that's where a lot of the magic happens. So on the web server, like I said, there are files. And say this file is the home page, home.html. If you were to look at this document, it really just looks like a text document, and it's actually in pretty plain English. You could read it if you looked at it. But what it's doing is describing in words what the page should look like. So it may say, there's a large image, there's a logo, there's 3 columns, whatever. When that code comes back to your local machine, all your browser is doing, whether it's Chrome or Safari or whatever you use, all it's doing is interpreting that code and making it look like it's supposed to. So It understands maybe there's a logo up top, and then it understands there's a large image here, and then it understands that there's some text, and maybe there's a smaller column over here, and then maybe there's a video. Whatever the page is supposed to look like, your browser is just taking that code and rendering it the way it's supposed to look. This, like I said, this document is in plain English. It's in a document called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. You'll also see a language called CSS. They're very similar in terms of they're just a language that helps to render what the page is supposed to look like. You'll also see in this code a technology called JavaScript. Now JavaScript kind of takes it to the next level because it allows for animations, it allows for pop-ups, things like that that basically make the browser do other fancy little things. But these things together are what we would call the front-end languages, and they're concerned again with making the page actually present. Now, I want to go one level deeper here with you because it's important and interesting to understand kind of how the next level of this works. So we have what we call the back-end languages, and the one that we use here at Skyhook most predominantly is called PHP, but there are others. PHP is a really cool technology because it allows the page to change dynamically. So if we take this page here that we're looking at, and say we wanted this particular section to be different for every user that comes in, maybe it's welcoming them back by name, or say we wanted it to put a different phone number up here at the top because of the source that they came in from. What PHP does, one of the things PHP does, is it talks to a database. So here on that same server, maybe you have your database, and PHP is literally going as the page code is being served to the browser, and it's pulling things out of that database and putting them into different parts on the page. And what that allows for is a dynamic experience. So if you have a shopping cart, for example, we've built the shopping cart page, but PHP is pulling from the database the items that you have in your shopping cart, which are different than what someone else might have. Stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. You don't need to remember that, but it's basically a technology that makes all of this a little bit more dynamic. Now, the reason I shared that with you is because I want to talk about content management systems. So again, a lot of what we build on here at Skyhook and what a lot of firms build on is a technology called WordPress. That is what's known as a content management system, or CMS. It's basically a piece of software where you as a user or us as a website developer can log in with a password, and we can actually put things into this database and specify what pages should look like, or who works for our firm, the different staff members, whatnot. We load that into the database ahead of time, and then when customers are visiting the site, it pulls from that. Basically, it's the technology that makes it possible for you to be able to update your own website live on the internet, as opposed to having to work with a web developer for each and every change. So that's a pretty cool technology, and one that's very much a part of modern web development. Now I want to go back just a second to add one last thing on this screen. So one of the biggest challenges in website development is that every web browser, be it Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox or Internet Explorer, whether you're on an Android or an iOS device, every one of those browsers interprets this HTML code just a little bit differently. And so if you're working with a web firm who isn't testing carefully or who isn't careful about this, you could end up with a web page that doesn't look right on one of those devices. And so again, proper testing processes, knowing what they're doing, is going to make it so that the page renders the way it's supposed to look each and every time. So there you have it. That's the basic version anyway of how a website works. I'd love to hear your comments, your questions, either in the comment section below or by reaching out, and would love to continue the conversation. Till next time, so long.